So one of your big shows is Lucifer, which is amazing. I love that show. I didn't even realize that it was a part of the DC comic world.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, like, of course. So what was it like directing on that show?
First of all, like that show was my first real opportunity to direct in television.
You're listening to Studio 22.
Welcome to Studio 22. I'm your host, Will Meldman, with my amazing co-host, Brock O'Hearn.
What's going on?
How you doing today?
Good. It's good to be back.
Back, yeah. Here we go. Back and better than ever. Back and beautiful. We are here today with writer-director Sherwin Shilati. Nice to see you.
What's up, gents? Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having us, dude. We're very grateful you can dedicate 6 hours of your day today for this podcast.
Someone call my wife. That sounds good.
Fresh off of our Comic-Con experience together. We were all on the panel together. It was fantastic. It was nice having a writer-director's perspective on that.
Right? Yeah, no, it was fun just to cruise Comic-Con and see all the cool stuff that's out there and talk to a few people who stayed for the panel and chat with them about what they're doing and you know, it was a lot of fun.
It's great seeing the sense of community at those things, right? Like, we're all there. We love all the same stuff for the most part, and what we don't, you know, what doesn't overlap, we argue about, and, you know, they're friendly arguments, and it's fun.
Yeah. You get detached sometimes from, like, who's consuming the stuff you're creating, you know what I mean? And it is an awesome experience to just kind of, like, connect with people who are digging what you're doing or digging things you might dig, and, you know, yeah.
So one of your big shows is Lucifer, which is amazing. I love that show. And I didn't even realize that it was a part of the DC comic world.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, like, of course. So what was it like directing on that show? Because literally Lucifer Morningstar is one of the most powerful DC characters out there as the fallen angel. And you were, you know, on that for a long time directing that. What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, it was first of all, like that show was my first real opportunity to direct in television. I came through this program, the Warner Brothers TV directing program, and in order to get into that program, you had to have a show that was willing to take a shot on you to come in and direct an episode. And I was really lucky in the second season. Jerry Bruckheimer Productions, decided to give me a crack. And
legend.
Yeah, I mean, the dude, I mean, I always tell this story, but like Bad Boys was the movie that kind of really went off in my mind as like, oh, this could be something I would love to do one day. And so it was a very cool experience to have my first real sort of paying job to be for his company. And he's obviously a legend, but like he watches every cut of every show they produce. Oh, wow. So he's very aware of what's happening. Like nothing gets past him. So just joining that team, really not knowing where it was going to go. Like I kind of felt like maybe I'm going to treat this as if I'll never get another shot, you know? So I showed up and, really just swung for the fences, and it ended up connecting. And, you know, that one little mid-season episode that I did for them, called God Johnson, it ended up sort of paving the way to, you know, directing every season, you know, remaining for them, and then doing their musical episode and doing their series finale and all that. So just getting back to sort of walking into that universe, and Lucifer Morningstar as a DC character, everyone was very aware of the sort of origin story of that character. But I mean, between the showrunners, Joe and Ildy, and the actors and Tom, who embody the character, it's like they sort of created their own unique, you know, status of this character. Like what this ended up being for television felt very different than what the comic book character to I mean, even in like, he's depicted as a blonde, you know, yeah. So like even the physical depiction is different, but you know, just, yeah, Tom made it his own, and being a top 10 Netflix show of all time and all that stuff. Like obviously the showrunners and the writers and everybody who was involved. But you know, Tom also just like played that character so beautifully, and You know, it was a pleasure to be a part of it.
Yeah, you mentioned, like the blonde and the, dark hair kind of differences. It's like, did you find, kind of audience and fans out there maybe like, hey, pointing out like, hey, that's different, but then they kind of watch it and then Tom, like you said, makes it his own, and then, you all come in and create something special and unique. Did you find that, an interesting relationship with the fans of the comic book?
Well, anytime I would show up to direct an episode, I'd be in the writer's room and I'd spend time with the producers and stuff like that. You know, you'd walk into a room and it'd just be wall to wall covered in fan art, gifts that were being given to the writers, amazing stuff. Tom had like collections of things in his trailer. Like they really cherished these things that came from the fans, and so it was really heartwarming to see how connected to the fans the showrunners were and the creators were and the actors and everybody. And you really did feel like, you wanted to pull it off for them,
That's great.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things you can do when making TV and film, or really anything that you're kind of bringing to the public, is pay homage to the people that support it, the people that are fans of it, and going out of your way to make sure like you show up for them, because they're the ones who are watching it, right? And when you start to go against that, and you're going to have a disaster. You're not going to have a show, right? I'm kind of curious, like, because Tom is such an incredible actor, like he's phenomenal. Over your period of directing over all those seasons, did you see or notice the writers kind of catering to him and who he was, and it became more enveloped in his personality and how he acted and all that stuff? Like, did it become more?
I think, first of all, this is like the most collaborative person you can imagine. Like, Tom is so collaborative, so open for input, wants to have these creative conversations with people. So it was truly a blessing to be able to, have him front the show and carry it in that way. Once again, so many talented actors in that show. But of course, Tom was our sort of tip of the spear, and I know for sure that certain writers, like when they were pitching dialogue, they would just do it in Tom's voice in the room. They would just try it out in his voice, in his mannerism, because he just created this unique thing, and so I also he can do anything, so it's like they've never shied away from putting him in crazy situations, or there was nothing that they felt like he wasn't able to step up and make his own. So yeah, I think to a degree they would like try on scenes and dialogue with like his voice and all that. That would help them imagine where it would go. But yeah, it was very collaborative always.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, you think of that Neil Gaiman, Mike Carey comic book run as like one of the greatest comic runs like ever, essentially, right? And it's like, was there, I guess this is kind of more of like a writing question, but was there like this feeling that you wanted to capture that essence, or really was it more of like, wow, we have this, great cast and great concept, and we're kind of gonna create something original and new, kind of while still paying homage?
Well, I mean, I think you'd have to ask Joe and LD that specifically, the showrunners. I think for me, showing up as a director on the show, I wanted to, be faithful to what the writers put on the page, right? And I wanted to get that message across in the most entertaining and compelling way possible. I kind of always say, from a TV directing standpoint, I think TV directors are doing their job, at a high level when they show you what you didn't know you wanted, right? Mm-hmm. So that's sort of the way I like to think about it, is like, yeah, it's my job to come and shoot what's on the page, but also to bring new ideas, to innovate and show you something that like maybe you never thought about, but maybe you would dig and think it would be appropriate for the show. So yeah, I think yeah, you'd have to get into those sort of motivations with the showrunners and the writers. But for me, I definitely was aware of the comics. I can't say that I was, reading every issue when I was growing up or whatever, but I knew that it was, they spend so much time with breaking these stories and writing these scripts, and blood, sweat, and tears. And, I took it as a very personal challenge for me to translate that in the most innovative, interesting way possible.
Yeah.
That's awesome. You said that was your first, basically, like, real big opportunity, paying opportunity, essentially. Like, this was your one shot, right? How did it feel going from where your journey starting to get to that point and then landing that? And, like, what was that feeling when you first got it?
Boy, my road is not like a linear straight path. So, I'm a med school dropout. Like, I was not planning on pursuing this career. I had a very dear friend of mine who was a college roommate who I'd known him since elementary school, and he was a film student. And I would like audit film classes with him, and really began to see. We went to the same high school. He injured his leg. We played on the same football team. He breaks his leg, and I was the captain of the football team. So I'm like, I'm gonna go visit this defensive lineman friend of mine, and I visited him, and like very quickly we realized, oh shit, we like the same movies. So we just started watching. He had the Friday the 13th box set. We just would fly through that in a weekend. We'd watch all the Jasons. We'd find the most deep cut horror movies and things, and so we developed this really, really strong friendship in senior year of high school. So anyway, we ended up going to college together too, and for a period of time we were roommates. And I would go out and like be his AD or his PA or whatever it was to help him make his short films and stuff. And I'll still tell him this to this day, but like, he had a lot to do with at least opening my eyes up to see that there was a career to be had here. He never mentioned how hard it was, but he was certainly like, oh, cool, directing, producing these things, writing, this could be a career. So, I'd say the first 10 years, and, we've sort of talked about this, it's like 3 levels of directing, right? It's like level 1, you put money in to get the opportunity to go shoot something, right? You got to pay for that. Level 2, you just show up, you shoot, but you don't make any money, you break even. But now there's a few more resources, right? And then level 3 is you're actually getting paid to direct, right? To practice your art. Damn, it's hard to get to that 3rd level, right? So it took me a while, so much so, I mean, we're talking over a decade to get to a place where I was, actually being paid by a studio to, direct. And for me, just going back to Brock's question specifically, what did that moment feel like? I applied to that same roommate who I'll tell the world his name, Adam Hendricks, who is a producer. He just produced Megan. So Adam called me out of the blue and was like, I'm working with Warner Brothers right now. They asked me if I knew any directors who should apply for this Warner Brothers directing program. And I think you should apply. And my response to him was like, fuck that noise. Like, these programs don't mean shit. Like, no one ever goes anywhere. And this is before the programs actually had some weight to them, like they could do something. Because I had applied to these programs before, Sony, Universal, whatever. Nothing happened. So I was really down on it.
You got into those programs and then
I got pretty far down the road, but even the people who got in, from what I could tell, but it's notoriously difficult to get people jobs based on these programs. And honestly, my first job was on a show called Lost, and I had seen people.
I think people have heard of that.
Yeah, well, my first job was on Lost, and I worked in the production office. I worked for the producing director, and I got to see sort of the sentiment and the feeling of like, these program type directors coming in and shadowing, and it was tough. Like people are there grinding, trying to work, and it wasn't always the most welcoming environment for someone who's wanting to just come learn and get exposure and stuff. So all that played into me being like, I'm not going to apply to this program. And so it was my wife who convinced me on like the day before the application was due, just apply. And we had just had our first kid. And, I had told her that, we kind of had this agreement that I would give her an expiration date of me trying to pursue this dream. And that date was creeping very close. And, maybe there's a part of me that kind of like gave up at that point. I don't know. I definitely was like, I had come to terms with doing other things with my life. Because I knew that my passion is to tell stories. So even if I could direct community theater, and do something else to earn money, I think there would be a world where I'd be at peace with that.
Yeah.
So so maybe that's what unlocked certain things or whatever. But I applied, and you know, I got into this program through a lot of like hoops that I had to jump through, but I finally got an opportunity. And I do remember in that moment, I was driving down some street, and I just pulled over and I cried. I was by myself. I was by myself, and I just had to pull the car over, and I just wept, you know. And I think it was certainly a cry of joy. But you never. There's so many talented people who like get opportunities and it doesn't turn into a career for whatever reason, right? So there were no guarantees that like, yes, sure, I'd do an episode, but like that could just flatline and like nothing after that. But I just think for that moment, getting to that place, it was a culmination of so much shit, you know, and grinding and, you know, so many nights, weekends, things, you know, the sacrifices, you know, and knowing that my family and my wife, like all these people had my back through all this, and like I can at least point to this thing and say, okay, I have a shot, and I'm fucking ready. I was very ready, and it was not going to be a lack of, you know, preparation that was going to doom me if it wasn't meant to work out, right? So So to answer your question, when I got that call, and of course, you know, they don't tell you like, you know, a big chunk of that paycheck's going to go to joining the union and then your agent and all that stuff. So it wasn't about the money, right? It was about, I guess, validation, right? To say, hey, okay, we think you deserve a shot, because I knew in my heart, like if I got invited to the party, you know, I will, you know, do enough to show that I can contribute something to this fiesta, you know? Yep. So yeah, I think, and it sucks, right? As an artist, like, what are we searching for? It's like validation is a part of it. And I don't know why. I don't know what in my childhood or in my life, why I'm searching for that in my work. But at the same time, I think any artist wants to know that their work is being received, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So I think there's a lot of psychology behind that. But anyway, it was one of the best moments of my life just to get that call. And then, you know, based on that moment, there were additional moments like, you know, during the process and shooting. And the moment in that first episode, I suggested a really crazy sequence. If anyone is a fan of the show and has seen that episode, God Johnson, it's the escape from the insane asylum. And that was a kind of like laying it all on the line kind of a moment for me with the showrunners and with the producers. I was like, you know, trust me enough to do this crazy sequence, this one shot, insane kind of thing. And hey, if I blow it, then you were right. But if I don't, then maybe I'll get a little bit more trust the next time around. Yeah. And that's how it went. So I'm just really fortunate it landed.
That's an amazing story. I you know, obviously appreciate you sharing. There's one part I kind of want to go back to and highlight, you know, especially for a lot of the youngins out there, like that really struck me. So back in the day, I literally had that same, call it a tradition with one of my buddies. It was me, one of my friends, and every you know, Friday night, we'd pick a horror film and we'd saddle up and we'd, you know, watch all the classics from basically everything you named, The Omen, The Exorcist, you know, and we went through all of them, and we developed this amazing affinity for horror films and film in general, of course, but special effects, visual effects, all that. But it really meant something to us. And it was like this epic tradition that opened our eyes to a whole other branch of film that we didn't really know existed. And, you know, this feeling of, holy shit, like pure fright, right? Like just like adrenaline and like, holy, you know. And that led to taking a horror film class at USC, and then taking, you know, Alfred Hitchcock class and all that. And then, of course, us producing our first film, first film for me as a producer, The Resort, which was a horror film. I think you never know what's going to be those moments when you're young. And like at the time, we're like, yeah, we're just watching horror films, right? But things can like spark in you, and you can actually give things more meaning if you follow through on that. And I think one of the other main points and similarities I wanted to point out was you mentioned, years of sacrifice after that. And a very similar story with me of like, of course, it starts with interest and intrigue, but then, from age like 17 to 20 or 16 to 24, and then I was a PA, and then after that started producing smaller things. But anyway, you never know what's going to be those moments. And I wanted to point that out for people out there of like your passions and your interests can turn into something real and something tangible. And whatever the scale of that, you don't really know at the time and until you pursue it, or if you want to pursue it. And I just think that was like really cool and really valuable information. So thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely. No, and I agree with you. And I think to put even a finer point on it, it's like it's a feeling, right? It's a feeling that you end up chasing, right? So if you're doing whatever it is you're doing and you get that moment where you've forgotten what time it is and you don't know how many hours have passed and you don't care, then you're in the flow, right? And all of a sudden, oh shit, maybe I should be trying to do more of whatever that was.
Yeah.
And like going out on the weekends and, doing the short films with Adam or whoever was shooting, them, I could be helpful or whatever, like being in these film study classes. Like I remember, I would do late nights, like 1, 2 a.m. in the library, just studying organic chemistry or whatever it was to get through my MCATs and all that stuff. And that was a grind, right? And like I could account for every second I was in the library for that. But like when I'm out there, building a set or like, operating a camera or like working with actors or like even, getting crafty for the people who like are donating their time. It's like, it just was like, oh shit, we're a part of something, we're creating something. And there's a joy here and a high that like I need to investigate, right? And so I think anyone who's out there who's feeling those moments, like, think about spending more time chasing that, in a healthy way. But yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. We need to pay attention to what brings us that feeling,
Yeah. I'm fully with you on that, man. I remember the first film I ever did. I got an opportunity to work with Tyler Perry through all these crazy series of events. And it was, again, I had no experience in acting. I didn't know anybody here. I didn't know what classes I was supposed to take. I just knew like I had to be here, and I knew I wanted to do this since I was 5 years old, and I'd done like plays and stuff when I was 10, 11, 12. But when I got that opportunity, I remember being on set, and it was a whirlwind because we shot an entire feature in 5 days,
Wow.
But I remember these massively long days, and let's say I had a 14-hour day and they're still filming. I would stay on set just to learn what the DP was doing, or to shadow Tyler if I was allowed to, but spend as much time, like, because that feeling, especially in a short span like that, sometimes when you go on to set, it is only a couple days, or it could be months, it all depends on what you're filming or what role you're playing in that process. But there is like no better feeling for me than being on a set. Because every set you learn something from, whether it's the people that are directing or even the producers behind the scenes, right? The writers, the actors, that whole experience is a whole new way to shoot something, whether it's a comedy or drama or whatever it is. And like you're saying, it's like getting this high of, that's what for me, I never understood, is how someone can be I can understand getting in a bad mood, but like just innately being a dick on set, or like ruining that whole vibe. Because one person, I've seen it so many times, ruin that experience for everybody, where I've had people their first time ever being on a set, and I'm like, dude, I love this more than anything, but that guy, he does suck. I'm not gonna lie, he does. And they're over here saying like, my experience is so bad from this dude that I never want to be on a film set again. I'm like, that sucks because you're missing out. Like, at least for me, I would do it. I say it all the time, and I've done it plenty. I'm sure as you have as well. When you love something, like, I'll do it for free. I'll do it, if there's some way that I could find to support myself. I don't care if I was in the biggest film in the world. If it was free, I didn't get paid for it. Obviously, I would love to get paid for that.
Sure.
But I would do it because it's what I love.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think, to your point, it's just finding those things that light a spark in you. Like, that you're passionate about. And I found through chasing my dreams, you say you're a med school dropout. I guess technically I can say I am too, but only because I looked at a piece of paper that said you could be a doctor and it's going to take this much time and you make that much money, right? And I realized I didn't want to do that, and that wasn't my path. So I dropped out that day. Yeah, exactly. But I went and chased the dream because I figured I might as well do something that makes me happy, And that was the thing as a child, that I escaped into, that helped me get through my life, and I knew I wanted to give that back to people. So, like you're saying, that validation you get, like the first time I saw myself in a theater, I went to the premiere, and you see people's reactions to like a funny moment or something that you did, or people texting you about the show they just saw you do, or people you're working with, and it's like, and it's ebbs and flows in this business, right? Sure. So you said 10 years. Like I'm at that point now, man. Like I've done some really cool stuff. I'm very grateful, but I don't have the career that I want, or that I envision for myself. And I'm not going to stop till I get there. But I have these thoughts every now and again, these intrusive thoughts that are like, what am I doing, man? I'm not making a real living here. Like there's years where I've done very well, and there's years where I didn't do anything, and it's the ebb and flows of that. So it's like, I love what you're saying of what is it for you that, was it that moment that you decided like, I'm going to go all in this now, and you're going to keep going? Or was it like, what kept you going over those 10 years is kind of what I'm
That's a fascinating question, man. I don't know if anyone's ever asked me that. Partial insanity, probably. See, like for me, my parents are immigrants. They settled in Los Angeles area like in the late 70s, early 80s. I was born here. My sister was born here, but as a first generation American, like you don't have a ton of options as you're growing up, and as far as professions go, I call it the Holy Trinity. You can be a lawyer, you can be a doctor, you can be an engineer. Mm-hmm. So I chose doctor. That was the path I was on. And to say to my folks, after going through, all the work I had to go through to get into medical school, I was doing cancer research at Cedars-Sinai, and I was getting ready to, a couple months, maybe a few weeks away from moving to Chicago to start med school. And in that moment, I was like, I can't do this. I can't do this. And like, I had put in work to get to that point. Took the MCATs twice, like all that bullshit. Anyone who's done that knows it's a grind. Like you'd rather do a lot of other stuff than that.
Oh yeah.
So fortunately I didn't, the financial commitment of a medical school tuition and all that stuff, I didn't get that far, fortunately. But I did have to break to my parents, like, I'm not going down the good immigrant kid path. I'm gonna spark on this different path that like you guys can't help me with. That I don't have anyone to, guide me, that you guys don't know anybody who can help. You know what I mean? It was like so foreign to them. It was a shock. And like, they didn't talk to me for a little while. Yeah. But eventually, I'll never forget, my mom called me and she's like, I'm at the grocery store and I just met an agent and I want to tell him about you. And I'm like, Mom, abort. Stop right now. But in that moment, I recognized, oh shit, she's kind of getting on board.
Yeah.
Right. So, I think part of what motivated me over that amount of time, and it was more than 10 years, dude. It was probably like more like 12 to 13 years. What motivated me during that time were a couple of things. One, I was striking out on this endeavor that like no one in my family or whatever had any idea how to even, approach. So I wanted to, be a pioneer in this sector of life, right? As an artist and just in the film and TV business and entertainment. But I also was curious to see how much I could learn and how I could push myself creatively, and see kind of what was trapped inside this human being, inside of me, and kind of what my unique voice was. I was always interested in sort of like carving that out and figuring out like, what do I have to say? Like, what do I care about? What's interesting to me? What's funny to me? What's sad to me? Like, so
that stuff's really important.
Yeah, I think that's becomes your compass, and helps your work. I don't want to say stand out, but helps your work be more representative of you. And I think in the long run, that's always an important thing when you're consuming so much stuff, right? Yeah. yeah, it was not always easy, but I did, it's like those little like, if you're like playing a video game or something and like you run into some like HP points or something like that, and like just enough like, Link got just enough heart to like keep going to the next
Yeah,
level.
yeah.
So there's just enough like little pieces of heart, over those 13 years to like keep me going, working with interesting people or learning from interesting people or, making a little thing here that like got a reaction or like whatever. But yeah, I think all those things factored into keeping me going. But I did reach a point, very honestly, like I did reach a point where I was like, okay, there will be a line here that eventually I will, if some career hasn't sort of like made itself known and I can identify a way to support my growing family. We just had our first kid. Then I do need to. I feel like it's my wife supported me for all these years to help me find my path and pursue what I wanted to pursue, and I want to repay that favor by saying, okay, cool. I'll still find a way. I promise I'll find a way to be artistically satisfied, but I will bring some WTO and come home or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you get to that point, and I think that's just the way that it worked for me. I know some people who don't have that line and probably will never have that expiration date. I like to call it expiration date, and not to say people have to have that, but it worked for me because it allowed me to, you were saying all in, right? I think there's an all in version where you're committed to the work that you do, you're committed to the things you want to go after, but at the same time, you embrace having other aspects of your life. You embrace like the interests in other things. And,
Yeah.
for me, my wife was the one that keep me grounded and helped me see that there's a world outside of our business that is rich and beautiful, and like there's the power of experiencing things, therefore informing your work. That feedback loop is an important one to remember, because I feel like if you get too buried into I gotta grind, how many people have I called today, I gotta network, I gotta write 3 scripts this year, I mean, that's all good to like stay on track and all that, but don't forget to experience, don't forget to like find other interests. Like I, I've gone crazy for pickleball. Like I straight up discovered pickleball like 6 months ago.
Yeah.
And I wake up thinking about it. I go to sleep thinking about it. I don't know who the fuck invented this sport, but like it is very addictive and like terrifying at the same time, but so much fun. But like it just, I only bring that up to say like, I have a very similar level of passion about pickleball that I do about creating art, and it's like just getting out there and living as much gosh darn life as you can, because that informs your work.
Yeah.
Dude, hell yeah. A few things. One is my pops always says the best thing that ever happened to him was failing the LSATs and, not becoming a lawyer so he could kind of get into real estate and do all that. It kind of reminds me of this golf analogy too, where it's like you got to enjoy the struggle with golf because you're not going to just go out and be good.
Right.
And like it's essentially a similar thing with like any type of career, right? Like you just got to go out there and enjoy the process. And, I think it's nice hearing your perspective because you have such a positive outlook on it. You were there to learn, you were there to grow, like we all are, right? But, a lot of people just kind of get fed up or aren't as passionate about it and, just kind of fade away. But it's inspiring to hear.
Oh, thank you. I want to mention Brock was saying he had friends who've been on set and like that sort of thing, but then got a bad experience from or from someone on set. One thing I want to share with whomever is listening, if they do get those opportunities to be on set and to learn and be exposed, like pay attention, right? Like even if it's not genuine, make it look like you want to be there, right?
Yeah.
Like because we pay attention. We are seeing the folks who are there who are actually into what is happening, who want to learn. And it goes a very long way if you are seen as somebody who like actually cares and is like watching the take and is listening to the department heads talk to each other and listening to what the actor has to say and listening to what the writer, director saying, producer saying. And just like, yes, fly on the wall, but also like be inquisitive, like at the right time, right?
Exactly,
like appropriate timing, but be curious, like one of the things that people forget is like as people who make stuff, we like to talk about the stuff we make.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And maybe sometimes it feels like, oh, I don't want to talk to this person about that. I don't want to bother them, whatever. At the end of the day, people want to talk about the stuff they're bleeding for and spending so much of their time creating. They don't mind talking about it at the appropriate times, So like be inquisitive, be curious, and listen. And I think that'll get you very far on a set,
That's great advice. Yeah. I've felt that too. Like it just being on any set I've ever been on, even just shadowing directors, you sit there and it's like, there's these in-between moments at the right time that it's like the most fun.
Yeah.
It's jokes get told and memories get brought up, or like even learning there. Sometimes there's been times where like I've actually given advice from other times that I've learned and helped a shot, and I'm not even a part of the project, but just because people have different processes, right? Like when I've shadowed Tyler, for example, I learned his formula, and how he's able to pump things out so quickly, right? But it's also the way he shoots, like how many people do you know that shoot 3 cam simultaneously, 2 overs and a wide at the same time? It doesn't happen too often.
Right.
But it's interesting because, you do 1 take, 2 takes, and then you have a whole scene done and you move on to the next thing. But for me, it's like, it's exactly that. Like the more you know, the better I found as an actor, the better an actor I'm going to be. When I know what the director's doing, and then I know what the grips are doing, and I know what the writers had to do to get us to this point, the whole process it took the load off of me as an actor of like, yeah, I might be in front of the camera, but I'm like 5% or 10, not even 10% of this whole thing. Like, yeah, I got to make this thing go.
Yeah.
And I got to give everything. I've got to give 110 of everything I have to offer. But at the same time, like, I had anxiety my first time on set, and the camera's right on me, looking me in the face, and I couldn't even get my words out, And once I got past that, and I realized how much bigger and collaborative this whole process is, it gave me a freedom to step back and just be, and just do my work, right? But through learning, through being inquisitive and learning the whole process it takes. It's an army to make a film, dude.
Oh, that's what makes it so fun, right? It's like I don't think there's, you have sports like golf, you have sports like football, right? Like, this is the most collaborative, ultimate collaboration, as far as art forms go, And I know we've got our auteurs out there who, like, really it kind of begins and ends with a singular person's voice. But at the same time, there's still tens, maybe hundreds of people, maybe thousands of people, depending on what the film is, who have to work in concert, right? And that's a high that, like, you can say it's like going into battle. I don't want to compare it to something like that, but it's you go into this stressful, challenging thing together, and like the goal is everyone to elevate each other's work and create something memorable or lasting or effective.
I have a great tie-in for this. I'm smiling over here. So I shadowed Doug Ellen for a couple months on Entourage. It was one of the later seasons. I think the house.
I hear he's a great pickleball player.
Oh, speaking of pickleball,
yeah, Doug Ellen, holler at me. Holler at me, Doug Ellen,
dude, that's another tie-in. But that set was especially like season 6 of a show, right, or 5 or 6. It was very relaxed. Everyone knows what they need to do. The AD was a guy named Gary Goldman, who also did Shameless, House of Lies a little bit, Animal Kingdom, which I want to talk about with you. And, Gary was allowed to kind of be the floor general as the AD, assistant director. And Doug was able to kind of focus more on the actors and, just getting all that. And, Jerry's messing around, telling jokes, and just kind of like that vibe. And you kind of see by that point, it's kind of like a well-oiled machine where, like Brock is saying and you're saying, like, people are actually able to relax a little bit more and enjoy it a little bit more because the basic things that need to get done are being done because they have like a system. But speaking of Animal Kingdom, I kind of wanted to tie into some other work that you've done and some other shows you've been on. So what was that experience like?
Animal Kingdom was one of the shows that like I originally was just a fan of the show. I was watching the show. No sort of like agenda behind it or anything. I fucking loved the show. I loved how dark it was. I loved the performances. Just the aesthetic of the show. Being from Southern California myself, like just that oceanside vibe they had going on, and cool. Sort of translation for the American audience from the Australian movie. So I was a big fan of the show, and I remember just saying to, I think maybe my agent or something like that, I was like, I really dig this show. This is really cool. And then somewhere along the line, I had done some work for Warner Brothers, and that was a Warner Horizon show, which is, I guess, the equivalent of like their pay cable studio or whatever, pay cable or just regular.
It's like a freebie for Amazon or something like that? Or?
No, it was like they produce things like for HBO and little, I guess, I don't know, whatever, cable. I'll just say cable studio.
Yeah.
No judgment on the content. So somewhere along the line, someone had reached out to me from that studio. It was like, "Oh, we heard you're a fan of Animal Kingdom. Like, would you like to talk about meet?" Da da da. And then I had taken a pitch out. A book was coming out, and I took a pitch with a writer. His name is Matt Kester, and we took a pitch out together and really hit it off. And Matt is one of the co-EPs and writers of Animal Kingdom. And I told him, "Hey, I love your show, man. So, it's fantastic. I'm really digging it." So a couple of years go by, and Matt and I stay in touch. And then this thing pops up, this Animal Kingdom thing that I think it was during the last season, the third to last episode of the series. And they were looking for somebody, and I had a couple nice meetings and stuff, and they offered me to shoot their third to last episode and talk about like a well-oiled machine. Like, they really had everything dialed in, and like for someone to sort of brand new to the show to step in the third to last episode could have really like thrown a wrench in the gears,
Right.
like
Yeah.
because they were cruising towards the end. But what was really cool is the episode that I directed ended up being written by Matt. Just by chance. Just by chance. He was the writer of that episode. I remember calling him from my house in North Carolina. I called him, and he lives in Hawaii. And I'm like, it was like 6-hour time difference. I'm like, I hope this fool picks up. And I'm like, dude, you're writing my fucking episode. And like, so we totally vibed on that, and it was so much fun. It was during COVID, but he wasn't on set. But like anything that popped up, I just hit him up on the cell. I'd be like, do you want it to go down like this? What was your vision? And so we would talk about things. So it was really one of those fun moments in this business where like you get to work with a friend. But that show was so cool to like be a fan of something, and then eventually, without any like, I didn't expect to work on the show, but to have that opportunity was just a very cool like Hollywoody type moment. You know what I mean? And the cast, absolutely incredible. Like love those guys, and it just was a lovely place to work, and very talented people. And we did a very cool, interesting episode, and I will definitely cherish that time.
Hell yeah.
I mean, that's real full circle, dude. Going from working with Matt and going to pitch, right, and then to directing one of his episodes on a show that you're a fan of. Like, that's when it's like, for me, what I would call that is just being in alignment, man. Like, you're in just the where you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
I feel, anyways.
Yeah.
Are there any shows that? How do I word this? Like, I guess it's more just like what's been one of your favorite shows, with obviously not like putting any other ones down, but if you had like a more of a fun experience, or have you enjoyed a process that maybe maybe like an obstacle that you didn't know was going to arise, and you overcame it in a way that,
I mean, I think every show is unique. Every project, right, is unique. I have to go back to Lucifer in that I've done 7 episodes for them. So at a certain point, it felt like coming home. Maybe after the 3rd one, it was like coming to see all my buddies. You know what I mean? And I was like, there was a joy in that like, if I saw that on my schedule, I knew for this month I was going to be shooting Lucifer, I would just be like, I'm about to basically go to the best party for a month, and have the best time. And so I think, there's just the frequency, and I was very fortunate to get multiple opportunities to work on that show. So you get tighter with these people as you, and I have done shows that I've done more than one episode, and with all those shows, you just get tighter and closer and closer. So I can only imagine like a Entourage or something like that, people who are, creating these shows or bringing them to market, and like it is their job to produce this show for 4 or 5, 6, 7 years. Like I remember my second episode of TV, I did NCIS LA, and it was their 10th season.
Yeah.
And they were so tight. Yeah. Like the crew and cast, everyone just like best friends. And it was like, they were telling me stories like, yeah, like our kids have grown up together. Like,
so
10 years, like their kids are like going to college now. And like, and they all know each other. And it was like such a cool, it's like one of the parts of our business that, is really heartwarming and makes it worth all those crazy long hours, is like to know that you're sharing this with other people and they know what you're going through, and you develop these lifelong relationships and bonds, So I'd say like it's always fun to come back to a show, but every show has its unique challenges. I'm trying to think of something that was like really, out of nowhere, but like I've been involved in, scenes, or I should say like episodes where like they try and shoot 3 things, like 3 different episodes in one day. So you've got like 3 directors like sharing crew, sharing department heads, sharing actors and this and that. And like in those moments though, you flow. You're like, I'm going to go with the flow. I'm going to be an additive piece to this puzzle. I'm not going to complain. I'm not going to gripe that I don't have, these things that I want. I'm going to bring the vibration up. And I think that's always served me really well, no matter what the challenge has been. Is like you just roll with it and be a positive force.
Not complain about it, but how do you problem solve it? How do you fix this problem, right? Like and I think that's one of my favorite things about whether it be directing or acting or just anything in filmmaking, is like it is a series of endless problems that you have to navigate and figure out. Because you think you'll be shooting a beautiful scene out in the sun and it's downpouring, and it's like, well, can we make this work in the script, or do we have to do something else, or can we just flip it and shoot the scene we're supposed to shoot 4 days from now today? Like,
right.
But yeah, it's really figuring that out, man. But I love hearing that. I think you got something?
Oh no, I mean my head's like spinning with that. Producing stuff. It's all it is problem solving, right? Like it's improvising and solving problems like. On the go, you're like the ideal director to work with if you're even like halfway suggesting like, I'm going to be additive, for sure. That's like the greatest thing in the world. I mean, it'd be so fun to work together on something.
Absolutely, yeah.
What was like the defining factor, or what made you decide that you wanted to be an actor? I mean, director. Well, talking to myself, guys.
I haven't come to that moment yet. But.
No, but directing. Why did you choose directing?
I think because I recognized in myself that maybe my superpower was bringing people together and getting everyone to like work, like I said, in concert towards a common goal, right? Mm-hmm. So I take pride in bringing, the best out in other people, right? I'm not going to sit here and pretend like, it's me that brings a genius, it's not that at all. But I do take a lot of pride and care in like finding that galvanizing thing that brings people who are way more talented than me together to create something as a whole, as a team, So I think directing was a natural sort of like, I identified that like, okay, you're surrounded by all these super talented people. Like how do you like connect those dots and connect those strings and get everyone to work to a common goal? So that challenge was really interesting for me, and I kind of was always that type of person growing up in high school and stuff. I was kind of always the storyteller, but like I sort of was able to straddle like different friend groups, and it was very seamless, never a problem. Yeah. And I guess to me, and I really enjoyed having friends across all different groups or whatever it was. And so I was excited by that. So I feel like, when you step onto a film set, you don't know everybody at first, and like people come from different backgrounds, and but they're all there for a reason, right? Can you activate the talent inside these people and bring it to a new level, but then have the pieces fit together, So I think that's why I was attracted to it. When I knew I wanted to do it, I think definitely, like I mentioned, Bad Boys, right? Seeing Bad Boys, at least it showed me, I grew up, I think my parents were like the first family on our block to get HBO. And so we got HBO, and back then there wasn't that much content. Like HBO would like rerun their blockbuster movies. Like you could watch Saturday night at 8 p.m. was their premiere. But if you got up early enough at 6 a.m., they would play it first at 6 a.m.
Oh, no way.
So I'd fucking get up, I'd go downstairs, fire up the TV, and watch the 6 a.m. movie. And I'll never forget, maybe the first weekend we got HBO, Predator was the movie.
Sick.
And I sat down, everyone's asleep, fire up Predator, and that was it for me in that moment. I was like, I love movies.
Yeah.
This is my love language. This is how I'm going to communicate the rest of my life.
My brother and I had the Predator and Blade VHS, and those were like our two go-tos.
Those are it, man. So, that became like the beginning of this love affair with just TV. And I think my parents, as sort of immigrant parents, were, didn't really know how to introduce America to us, and like TV was a great option, it was right there. And so I kind of learned my English from television, and became my best buddy for a very long time. So I think once I got to Bad Boys, that's when I started to see like the artistry of filmmaking. I know that sounds interesting, but like it woke me up, because those were the movies I was watching at that time. I wasn't firing up Citizen Kane and as a 9-year-old or whatever. But like Bad Boys was like, oh my god, like whatever this guy Michael Bay is doing is doing something to me. Like the way he wraps around in slow motion as Will Smith and Martin Lawrence stand up, and so like I just started. I asked myself, like, who's making those decisions? Like, who is envisioning this thing?
Yeah.
And when it started to narrow down, and you realize, oh, the director or the writer-director or whatever it is, has a lot to do with that. That's where I wanted to be. I wanted to be in the mix of that, in between all those things.
Yeah, I think there's a reason Bad Boys 3 can come out like 15 years later and still make like a crap load of money. I could definitely see it's interesting you mentioned Bad Boys, because I watched Obliterated. So first off, congrats on the success of Obliterated on Netflix. I mean, it's been #1, it's been charting, and it's really fun, right? And like I can definitely tell like some Lucifer, similar type stuff of like action comedy, right? And I love hearing that Bad Boys is like one of your inspirations, because I can tell that in some of your work, right? I think you are so great at that action comedy content. And, essentially, you mentioned teamwork and coming together. And I noticed that immediately in Obliterated. You have like all these different types of people from all different types of walks of life, I should say. But they feel like one cohesive group. And I think like that is really interesting to point out too, because you could tell. And like after talking to you about it, it's like, yep, like that's what is so appealing to me about this right now. So congrats on Obliterated, and I don't really have a question in there.
No,
it's just really cool.
Thank you. I feel super grateful to be a part of that experience. All credit to Josh and Hayden and Jonathan and Dina over at Counterbalance. They created an awesome show, and one that I just immediately resonated with when I read the scripts, heard the pitch, all that stuff. Like I was like, oh god, this is gonna suck if I don't do this job. I knew that it was in my wheelhouse and that I wanted to be involved. So yeah, all credit goes to them. But just being involved, the cast was incredible. The tightrope walk that they had to do as making the audience laugh, yet also making them care, and just in these really like absurd scenarios, but they just knocked it out of the park, and it's very gratifying to see an audience respect it, appreciate it, enjoy it. Like you said, rocking it in the top couple spots of Netflix these last week or two.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I hope it keeps going, and they keep telling the stories of the Obliterated Squad, and but yeah, I think that's one of those moments where like that's probably of the television projects that I've done closest to that moment right so far, where I watched Fired Up Bad Boys for that first time, and saw what was going on in that film, and like I sort of always trying to get closer to that, touch that
That's
a little
awesome.
bit.
Hell yeah.
What are some films that you watch regularly? I guess you could say, like, is Bad Boys
Regular.
one of them? Like you put it on like once a year or something like that. You know what I mean? Like,
It's so funny, man. Like since I became a dad,
Congrats.
thank you. Yeah, well, it's been a while now. I've got two kids, 5 and 10. But since the second one rolled along, like, oh my goodness, finding time to watch, things, whether they're old or new or whatever, it becomes tough because you're focusing on creating your own stuff, and when you're not doing that, you're focused on the family and other things you got going on.
Yeah.
So I would say I kind of lean more into television. Like there's like anytime I go on location and I'm shooting, there's like these shows that I like run through top to bottom in the background of my time on on location. It usually is in this order. It's like The Office. Like I'll cruise The Office, like all the seasons, and I'll just let it ride. And I'm a huge fan of the original British Office.
Me too.
Yeah, just major. I was blown. That was another like seminal moment for me watching that series. That was before I chose to try and become a filmmaker, and I watched that, and that really helped sort of guide me into the direction I ended up going, for better or for worse. But the American Office. So I'll just put that on loop in the background. I'll get through that. Maybe that'll take me like a week or two. If I still have time, I'm on location. I'll probably end up firing up from top to bottom Workaholics.
Oh, nice.
So I'll just let that cruise. I'm a huge fan of those guys and their comedy, and so that'll be a part of my just like meditation on location. And usually it's common. I'll go into Parks and Rec. It's just stuff that is that tickles me in a way that either reminds me of my youth or like being a kid, or just reminds me to laugh, because I feel like, you're inundated with so much shit. So I guess I would say, to answer your question, I probably avoid the heavy drama stuff, not because I don't like movies like that. I mean, my favorite movie is probably Shawshank Redemption.
Nice.
That was another one I sat down in front of the TV, and I think I was like 11 or 12, and watched this thing by myself, sitting, crisscross applesauce right in front of the tube, and just watch the whole thing beginning to end, and I was floored. I was like, power of cinema, power of movies. But it's usually stuff that like keeps my vibration high, that I'll just loop and go through. But I'm very excited. Really, to answer your question, the one film that I watch a lot is Nacho Libre.
Nice.
Yeah, I'll fire up Nacho Libre. Like, if we end up getting into like text battles with each other, you'll get like 40 GIFs from Nacho Libre.
Yeah,
that's just how I
that's
communicate.
amazing.
That's it. Like, you'll see text to my mom with Nacho Libre.
I just saw this hilarious skit on Instagram the other day. It was all like 5 Nacho Libres attacking this dude, saying he was gonna take stuff out on orphans, and then he just pops up out of nowhere, and they all just attack him at the same time.
Oh my
I'll have to
God,
find and send
dude.
it to you, bro.
I mean, the real joy now is like watching that with my daughters. So my 10-year-old will we'll be in the middle of
that's
the
awesome.
house, and she'll scream across the hall. She'll be like, "Read some books," we'll just go after each other. Go away. It's just
awesome.
that's where like, that's the power of the art form of like, film and TV and stuff. Like, it can connect us over generations or whatever. So it's fun to have that experience now with my kids.
Huge shout out to Jack Black for sure.
Big shout out.
Those are definitely a lot of the same comedies I'll fire up as well. We had a great sit down with Ben Silverman, one of the EPs on The Office, and it's almost like, what do you even say when you're talking to him? And that's just quote it. Like, there's so much I want to talk to you about and ask about. Do you have any upcoming stuff or anything in the pipeline that you can share?
Yeah, TV wise, I'll be doing some Cobra Kai in the new year. Very excited about that.
Love that show.
Joining them for their last season, and same team that produced Obliterated. So I'm fortunate and grateful to be joining them in the dojo. So that's a big deal for me. I'm from the San Fernando Valley, so those movies held serious significance for me. So yeah, just once again, the full circle Hollywood thing, like just being a part of a teeny part of that show is a dream for sure.
I mean, that'll be incredible. That's such a great show, and talk about one of the best like reboots, comebacks of all time, right? It's almost like Doctor Who in that way of like just bringing something back fully. The Jerry Weintraub was, like an uncle to me and like my mentor.
I love his documentary.
Oh yeah, His
God.
Way.
Yeah, His Way.
Yeah,
I always tell that Ferguson story.
Dude,
it's so
Fire
classic.
Ferguson.
Yeah,
Dude,
so smart.
my pops is in it for like a brief second.
No way.
He's like, he gives like a little interview in it. Not a lot of people. Alan Polsky wrote and directed it, I think.
That's
Great documentary.
Yeah,
they
so
played on
good.
loop at Summit Club, right?
Yeah. They just fire it on loop and just wait for my dad's like 30 seconds. No, but he did all the Karate Kids, and that was his thing. And Susan Eakins, who was kind of like my aunt if Jerry's my uncle. I believe she's still an EP on those series. I gotta check out if she's still working on it for Cobra Kai. But that is so exciting because I didn't think I'd be laughing that hard at like a Cobra Kai remake or like a Karate Kid remake. But it's just so freaking enjoyable, so I'll be keeping an eye out for that. Sure.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. Please do. Yeah, no, I'm more excited as another show that I was a fan of.
Yeah,
just straight up fan of, and the stars aligned to be able to participate in a very small way. So it's very exciting. Very exciting.
Yeah, it's so cool when you get to be a part of like history of like that's. I mean, Cobra Kai just in general is so iconic and so special for filmmaking and for films in general. But like to have it come forward now and you'd be able to work on it is so cool. Like I felt like that when I worked on History of the World, in part 2.
Yeah.
But I was just like, is this really happening right now? And I'm working on something with Mel Brooks. Like I never would have imagined in a million years that something like that would get to happen, right? But when it does, you're like, dude, I grew up watching stuff like this, or watching that, specifically. But you get to see it, and then you get to be a part of it. You're like, dude, this doesn't make any sense,
Yeah.
I don't know. For me, like that stuff came out before I was even born.
Dude, you remember how bad I freaked out when you told me you were going to be in that show?
Oh, it's nuts,
like,
dude.
No fucking way.
Yeah, I grew up watching all of Mel Brooks movies, and History of the World was such. My mom still will quote to me, "It's good to be the king." It's her favorite line, and I'll still get that quote. Yeah.
Are there any things that, like dream projects, or whether it's a remake of an old show that hasn't been done yet, or is there anything that you aspire to do one day?
Wow. That's a big question, dude.
Yeah, if you asked me that, I'd be like, shut up.
I really, I think, there's certainly like properties out there. I'd love to, say, hey, give me the reins. Let me take a crack. Probably all of them are spoken for, or very difficult to get the rights to. But I think, at least just getting to a place where, I've done enough, shown enough where I can, inspire people's trust and get them to let me take a crack and take those opportunities and know that like, okay, well, whatever he's going to do, it's going to be unique. It's going to have his point of view on it, and it's going to be something, special. So that's kind of just what I'm working toward in general, right? Is to continue to build that trust with, the people who, have the rights and have the material and all that. So I think when I think of careers that I admire, right, like the one person really stands out to me. Obviously, like we all are in awe of Christopher Nolan, and we're all in awe of like Tarantino, Edgar Wright, like all these great filmmakers with a unique voice. But like I love what Sean Levy has done, right, with his career, just all the different things he's done and where he started, where he's at now, and film, television. It's just really inspiring. I think if I could craft even a little tiny little, sliver, carve a piece of that off, I feel like that would be time well spent, like, a good road to go down. So yeah, there's so many inspiring people in our business. And I think when I just think about the variety in producing different things and the diversity in work and stuff, he definitely stands out to me.
Yeah, nice. Absolutely. Well, I definitely, want to give Roger Minchef and Rogue Matter a shout out. They were instrumental in kind of getting us all together. And, obviously we mentioned the panel at Comic-Con we all did and the booth and we had together and all that. But quick shout out to Roger and them for sure.
Roger.
Yeah, man.
Roger.
Is there any advice you'd give to young directors or people trying to break into the business, or like what would you say as far as maybe to help them grow as a director, become a better director, or kind of just navigating the waters?
I think our business is constantly changing, right? So like the stuff that was available to me when I was coming up, I don't even know if it's applicable now or what. I mean, I think there's a lot. The cool thing is there's more ways to get your work seen than there ever has been, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's an important thing to recognize is like, if you have work that says something that speaks to someone out there, don't be afraid to share it. Put it out there and let, audiences find it, right? So I think that's important. So I guess the note behind that is really like, be bold, right? Be courageous. As an artist, that is what you are hopefully one day being paid for. Trust your instinct, because that truly is the thing that separates you. We could all just copy the blueprint, and maybe we wouldn't really make a lot of headway, or I don't want to say stand out, but have work that says something a little louder. So I think. Just trust your instinct. Know that this is our world makes it seem like everyone's an overnight success, and it happens so easily. And all you got to do is, move to LA or New York or whatever, and it's going to happen. The reality is like 1% of 1%, right, of people actually get that awesome story. It's just that the media publicizes it to such a degree that it feels ubiquitous. It feels like it's always happening, right? So cool. If that is your story, hell yeah, like ride it, right? But likely it might not be. So just be prepared to put in the work. Surround yourself with, really, people if you can't surround yourself with people who are doing what you want to do, surround yourself with people who are interested in what you want to do, going down that same road, because like y'all are gonna eventually help each other. You know what I mean? Like some of my favorite times were like working with other young filmmakers and things and helping each other out and getting out there, and like eventually those people will either become something, or they'll move on to something else. But like at some point, if you're still hanging around, still doing your thing, those people become connections. Those people become forces of hopefully positive things for you. So I think at the end of the day, you need to create to have something to talk about, right? I think thinking about something you want to write, or talking about something you want to write year after year after year, it's that moment that you decide to execute where like things begin to change, right? So even if it's hot garbage, that's, I'm not saying go out and waste your time, but I'm saying go out and make something to talk shit about, because otherwise you're just in abstract talking shit about something, or talking yourself down off of something, and like nothing will ever get accomplished with that. So whether it's a silly little short, I remember I was like a cameraman for the LA Kings, the hockey team. They had this like kind of like a little show that they did and for like their YouTube channel or something, and I went and I would I would film it. They had on-air talent or whatever. I would film it, I would cut it, and I did that for like a few months, right? Well, one weekend they had like a Sony DVX like 300, if that I think that was the name of the camera. Definitely higher end than I had any access to, right? And I had it for the weekend. So I was like, oh
sick.
fuck that. I'm going to shoot something with this. So I took that,
awesome.
I took that camera, took it home, and shot a short with it, you know, and I had my dog, and my dog's best friend dog was staying at my house, and with my parents' friends were over, and I shot this little, like, you know, noir, like 3-minute short with the dogs and my parents' friend. And it was one of the, like, you know, one of my most favorite things that I've done. It can be found on YouTube. It's called The Badge.
I'm watching it right
Definitely
after this.
watching
But I mean, it's shit, but shit in the best possible way. Like I had the resource. I had a weekend. I could have chilled. I could have hung out, but instead I shot something, cut it, and it was done. And you know, that's that flexing of the muscle, right?
Yeah.
Like, just go out and make shit. It will get better, and you will have shit to talk about. And that's you got to have something to hold at the end of the day.
Yeah, I'm just.
That was my entire journey into comic book writing. Was I think I did 30 drafts of the first issue. That's the make something that's hot garbage and throw it out and rewrite it, and then just keep going. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just imagining somebody from the Kings just having it still in the can, like just watching this, like, the fuck are these dogs?
They're like, wait a second, where was the camera that weekend? Yeah,
That's
no.
hilarious.
I have an interesting kind of culture question, like especially because you're in the comedy genre sphere of culture. So like the Doctor Who 60th anniversary special just came out, and you had David Tennant, Catherine Tate, Russell T Davies, like you had the action-packed all-star cast returning, and then they come out and they kind of, without even giving a stylistic analysis of like the things, the facts are that the ratings were about a third or a half of the 50th anniversary. And I was just kind of thinking of, okay, there's a 10-year change. Like, has society changed where you have the same show, same people, that made it popular and a good comeback, but what was it that kind of had more than half the audience leave? And I was just curious to ask you, because you're so much in the mix and you're making these shows and you're out there doing it. Like, do you notice anything or is that like one specific example that's kind of hard to touch on, or what would you say?
I mean, I don't have sort of access to, all the data and things like that, but I know Norman Lear recently passed away, and I was listening to an interview that he did. And, they talked about All in the Family was reaching 50 million viewers a week. 50 million in the 70s when it was out.
Wow.
There's nothing that touches that on a scripted level.
Lows.
So I feel like the only explanation that I can think of is, especially for a show like that is such a property that means so much to people, is, over those 10 years, just too many avenues to consume, right? Too much division and distraction in terms of how we are getting the things we love, and there's just no longer this mechanism to get those bigger audiences. So I think niche programming will continue to rise. Like, people are going to find that specific thing that they're into, and maybe 200,000 people watch that show on a weekly basis or whatever. But I think it's probably a product of just more services, more platforms, more content. Probably over those 10 years, we probably hit that peak of, as far as TV goes, in terms of production, right? 550 TV productions in 1 year or something like that.
Yeah.
So I think it's probably has to do a little bit with just audience distraction.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure.
That's my best guess.
I kind of feel that same way. Where one, there's so many options out there, but at the same time, like, I keep, we went to a panel where they were talking about, why 99% of movies suck in Hollywood, right?
Yeah.
And my take on it was more of, and it's not even that I agree with that. It's just that my take is that there's so much content to produce and there's so much content being made all the time. So you're just consuming so much. So then all of a sudden, if you had 500 things made and even 100 of them are good, but you're still consuming those other 400,
right,
it's going to get thrown in that mix. And then all of a sudden it's like, it's diluted. You know, like I don't feel like
More of a numbers game.
it's more of a numbers game, yeah. But it again also it comes down to filmmaking, who's making the films, who's writing the storytelling, the ability to get stories made is so much easier now, right? But it's to a degree, but it's just the evolution of it is there's so much out there now where it's like even most people, a lot of you ask any kid, I feel like who they love, what movies and show, it's more actually who's their favorite YouTuber.
Sure.
You know, so
Yeah.
the way that
TikToker or whatever,
exactly.
yeah.
So it's just the way we digest content now is just so different. So I think there's that element, but every now and again there's shows and films that peek through and you're like, damn, that's good. You can't even deny that's good. But when you think about it at the same time, like I'm still thinking about Gladiator 3 times a week, dude. You know,
Yeah.
but a Game of Thrones, incredible, right? You know, especially the first 7 seasons, incredible show. But like I don't think about it as much as I think about Gladiator.
Sure.
You know, or even many of the shows from the 90s and, you know, early 2000s and stuff like that. So it's just kind of, it's different now, you know,
Yeah.
it's just different.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. Well, I mean, I think it should, there's an encouraging side of that though too, right? There's more ways to reach specific audiences,
Yeah.
in the event that like the stuff you're creating is ultra specific or, maybe not as broad or general. So I think that's a really special, aspect of the world we're living in now too. But don't let that shy you away from making
Getting
your
out there.
thing,
Good,
getting
yeah.
out there and creating. Man, there's nothing like it. There's nothing
Yeah.
like it. It's so much fun.
There's this quote I heard a long time ago, and it was the matter of being creative versus competitive. You know, it's like if you're competitive, you can only be as good or maybe a little bit better as somebody at something, right? But if you're creative, you're making your own thing. And then eventually maybe people become competitive there. But that for me struck a chord of like,
That's interesting.
yeah, like I never wanted to be like anybody else growing up. I just wanted to be me,
Right.
and whatever that is and however I show up in the world, but at the same time, like to be able to create, you can make a world, man. You can
Yeah.
you could take someone into a film and you get lost in that world and take them on a journey and make them forget about everything else that's going on. And maybe you can say you're competitive in some structure or some way in that format, but it really is like you can do anything with creation, and then competitive is only as good as, if you're lucky, as good as somebody else or maybe a little bit better, right?
And you kind of mentioned too the concept of like bringing yourself into your work and making sure you're working and building on yourself in order to improve your work. It's kind of like that because like you
Yeah.
can't create anything original if you're not like strong with yourself. That's right, because like then you're just competing with other people or like recycling stuff or whatever. But yeah, and that's interesting. You mentioned that is like pouring yourself into your projects for that creative, original feel kind of thing.
Yeah, and using the work to explore yourself too, right? If you're wondering like, what am I about?
Yeah.
Like find it. There was a scene, and I'll bring up Lucifer again. There was a scene in this episode of Lucifer that I did that was their musical episode, and Lucifer talks to his father God for the first time, and in the rehearsal, we just were doing the damn rehearsal, and I'm watching these two actors, and I just started to cry
Wow.
in the rehearsal because of like what this conversation meant to the characters, and like, dude, I'm not that guy. Like, I'm like, okay, we're on a film set. These are characters. This is a script. Da, da. For whatever reason, that infiltrated whatever I was going through at that time in my life.
Yeah.
Whether that was between my dad and I or whatever, and it like completely affected me. And like at the end of the rehearsal, like everyone looks at me to say cut, and I'm just like crying. And so I think and that's not a normal thing for me. So I think, it's another sign of like art is giving us these opportunities to explore ourselves, through it, right?
Yeah.
So like put yourself out there because you never know what you're working through. You never know what you're working toward,
Yeah.
and that's probably the most powerful, aspect of creating is like explore those things about you that you want to know more about through the work,
Love that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I feel like even for me, acting became the biggest form of self-discovery because I was able to do things as a character that I wasn't giving myself permission to as a person, and to be able to explore those and to let those emotions out or to, discover them, or right, go find them, or go make them in a scene or whatever it may be. It's like it gave me a freedom that I didn't have before. So I understood myself to a different degree. And then to help develop a character more, right, I have to do research. I have to understand more how that person thinks, how they feel, how they move, they operate, and how they interact in a space, with other people. So to that point, though, what you're saying, being able to use that art to heal, to grow, to understand, it's like I haven't found anything else like it in the world, and I think that is why this industry exists, you know what I mean? And that's why this is why I'm here. Exactly, yeah.
Dude, I'm working on McKenna Volume 2 right now, one of our comic books, and it's essentially like, I don't want to give away too much, but I'm writing from a female perspective in like this ancient tomb underground in Africa.
Very close to home for you.
Right. So I'm like, but that's the beauty of creating, is like putting yourself in other people's shoes. And like, what are they feeling? Like, what are their emotions? Exactly. I was going to make that joke, right? It's like, what does that mean to me, though, right? And that's how you can look at it, is what does it mean to you? And then how do you recreate that artificially to at least make it seem natural in a good way, right?
Yeah.
But that's the beauty of all of it. It's a challenge, and it's a very emotional roller coaster of trying to figure that out and what makes us human. How do you create something human on like a blank page? It's crazy.
I really hope, I just got this kind of vision a couple years from now that we're all sitting on set. You're directing an episode or two or maybe more of Kane, and we're all sitting here just like, right. You know what I mean? Like,
that'd be the dream.
It would be
Put it
really,
out there, man. Put it out there.
Yeah, you got to go create it.
That's right, man.
That's why we're here.
That's exactly right. No, it was great. I mean, thank you guys for having me.
Really appreciate your time, man. Thanks for coming on. And
absolutely.
Let's talk. Let's turn the cameras off. Talk shop.
Yeah. All right.
Dude,
thanks, guys.
Thank
you. Yeah, my pleasure, guys.
That was awesome.
Lots of fun. Thank you, Spencer.
Thank you for watching Studio 22.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
And follow our socials at Studio 22 Podcast.